Hello, hello, and happy Black Friday. Welcome to Office Hours, where we answer your questions 7 days a week. Alexander, let's dive into the first one.
First question this morning is from Joaquin Matus in Imperial Valley, California. What would be the best solution for camera control for an ARRI ALEXA Mini LF/Alexa 35 wireless rig on a large stadium multi-camera shoot? Vislink's Focalpoint doesn't seem to support Ethernet-based protocols. Is Cyanview or Silvus a viable solution?
Go ahead, Alex.
I'm not sure. I haven't done this with the ARRI, but what you want to look at is the ARRI Live. So the ARRI has a whole live system that has its own protocols, and so you may want to look at how a variety of these integrate with the ARRI system, because I think that's what you're going to want to make sure that you're sitting on top of. That's only about a year old, but definitely worth checking out.
Jonas?
Yeah, I would say if you can get something native, that always is preferred. I would also look into, sometimes there is a lot of your RF links might be able to transfer serial data, and you might be able to convert between that. So that might be an option. And alternatively, the Cyanview, especially with their LTE module, has worked really well for a lot of stadium productions I've seen.
Next question.
Peter Moore in Auckland, New Zealand is asking, as a follow-up to my cue from yesterday about clustering Macs via Thunderbolt, given the M4 Pro is Thunderbolt 5 and a throughput of 120 gigabits per second versus Thunderbolt 4's 40, surely that's a game changer. By the way, his hub was the bottleneck. A quality OWC hub would have been better.
Alex?
I think 120 gigabits per second is theoretical. I don't think that there's anything that's practically going at that speed right now. I think that some things are in the 50, 60, 70 range on some of their performance, but I haven't seen anything that even hits 100, it even hits 80. The fastest things that I've seen so far are in the near 60 gigs a second, which is funny to look down at it going, oh, it's only 60 gigs a second, but that's about half of that speed. So that's going to be part of it. It's still not going to be. There's a couple other things as far as clustering these. Number one is the software optimized for the hardware. I'm not sure any of the AI software is optimized for hardware yet. And then again, these throughputs are far less than what's built into the machines. And so using a lot of machines that are tied together are not going to be as efficient. But it is going to, eventually these clusters are going to be efficient. I just don't think I don't think we've seen that they're efficient yet. But I think that there is a huge opportunity for a bunch of Mac Minis to be, you have a closet full of Mac Minis, not taking up very much power, churning away on your local LLM.
Enough of them, then you probably can save on your heating bill, too. That closet just becomes a little center. Just get a fan out of there. Next question.
Solar.
Douglas Carmichael asks, when I use screen sharing in the Zoom client, the client automatically changes to my macOS system audio device to ZoomAudioDevice when sharing audio. Is that the default behavior? I'm using Audiomovers Inject to inject DAW audio to Zoom.
Alex?
Mickey McAchore said that Mickey says that don't select the share sound in the screen share selection button, and that that should work then.
Next question.
From the QR code, Jensen Olson in Standpoint, Idaho, is there a difference between different Dante chips, and is one better than another to provide clocking for a Dante network?
Jonas?
Definitely can find different types of Dante chips within your devices. I don't have experience with how they would affect clocking, but one of the things to keep in mind is that you might run out of flows if you have some of the older chips. So if you think, oh, it's all networking based, I can use as many as I want, I can pull that source 50 times. No, you can't. At least with the older chips, you'll run out of flow. So it's always important that you do know how much flows you need if you're not in a multicast environment, and then look at those different Dante chips, which one supports how much.
Alex?
Yeah, it shouldn't affect it shouldn't affect your clocking. So the clocking should be the same on all of the chips, but they do, as Jonas points out, all have different based on how new they are, but also the channel count and the flow count are the things you're going to want to pay attention to.
Next question.
Paul Valhus in Austin, Texas, discussed product placement on all productions, including streaming, and when it is effective and when it is ineffective.
Jesse.
I think product placement is a practice that sees like a high attrition rate in terms of efficacy. So that's why every couple months you'll see a new turnover in how products are being placed in YouTubers, videos, and in movies and in all media that we consume, because it really erodes trust and engagement and enthusiasm for the actual entertainment or information that you're trying to engage with. It's easy to change people's behavior. It's really, really, really hard to change people's behavior the way you want to. And I think as you see trends shift in product placement, what you're seeing is the people aren't changing how you want them to change because they get suspicious of the techniques you're using to try to change them.
Courtney?
Yes, I concur. Product placement has been around. A lot of people don't realize for half a century. They were using it in motion pictures back in the 30s and 40s, and they're still using it today. And it depends on how effective it is very difficult to gauge because there's no direct readout of are more people buying our product because it appears in this movie or that movie, or I think it can cross the line into a negative impact if it's too obvious. If the characters are holding up the product with a label toward the camera all the time and it's always the same product, the audience gets wind of that and can have a negative reaction, can think less highly of that product or even boycott that product. So you got to traverse a very fine line as to making your product placement there and not too obvious. You may have noticed that on Sony pictures produced by Sony Pictures, always have Sony TVs in them for some reason. And on all those Apple-produced streaming programs, they're always using iPhones and Apple laptops. I wonder why.
Alex?
By the way, Apple released a new ad. You should watch it. It's probably the best made ad of the season. As far as product placement, it comes in a lot of different forms, as Courtney and Jesse said. That, like, one of the ones that is kind of less known is that they'll take a lot of creators and they'll pay them just to wear stuff, but they'll do it in a very organized way. So they want a certain brand wants to push their sweatshirt or their brand or forward. They'll give the creators a bunch of money and a bunch of product, and all they got to do is wear them. They don't have to say anything about it. They don't have to recommend it. They don't have to do anything else. It's a very fine line with the FTC because it's not clear whether they really need to report that because they're not promoting it. They're not talking about it. They're just wearing the sweatshirt. But a lot of them, and what they do is they do the math of figuring out, what set of viewers are all looking at a group. It's not one creator, but a group of creators. And a lot of them are like, teen creators, and that kind of thing. They often have between, they're kind of before they get big enough that they can just do their own. It's like this kind of halfway between 1 and 4 or 5 million followers on TikTok is a good example. And so they'll bundle them together and then put that out. And you'll see a lot of that kind of that work now in social media. It really depends on two big things. One is how much does the viewer look up to the person or the movie or what they're watching, and how much do they trust it? It doesn't have to be both. Like it's, if they really look up to them, they may not trust them, but they really look up to them and they want to be like them, and they're more likely to buy stuff that they're using, even if they think it might be a shill. But the golden era is when they trust them and they really look up to them at the same time. And like, for instance, I was watching a thing from Gerald Undone yesterday that I thought he's so good at what he does. Like now watching Gerald Undone is such a great way to watch a master at not just what he does, but how he presents things. He's like, Small Rig gave me this tripod, and I'm not going to be, and they paid me a lot of money to talk about it. He just said, they gave me this tripod. They paid me a lot of money to talk about it. And Potato Jet is a friend of mine, and he's the one that designed it with them. So this is not going to be a partial thing. but I do have some complaints, and I'm gonna mention some of the things that I'm concerned about, and if that's okay with Small Rig, then you'll see this video, and if not, you won't see the video. you won't see this, but he just puts it out there. But what Gerald Undone has done is he's people look up to him because he's a smart guy. And they also trust him because he's totally transparent about the interaction that's going on there. And I think that those are the kind of things where product placement works well. A lot of us, the golden, what a lot of us have looked at for years is making movies interactive. You can see the beginnings of that in Amazon's X-Ray. I think that they're probably moving towards this. So right now, X-Ray is this thing where you can in Prime, where you can select any scene you're in, and it'll show you all the actors that are in it, and you get more information about those actors. Well, that's just priming you, as Amazon, they're priming you to get used to the X-ray existence that's useful. Of course, what they could be telling you is all the shirt that the actors are the shirt the actor's wearing, the car that they're driving, and like when you look at cars, cars are a big thing that gets product placement. There was one point where I think that James Bond was driving a Ford, but not like just the Ford. And I was like, wow, Ford paid a lot of money for that. Like that's what an insider looks at. They're like, wow, that was really expensive to get James Bond to drive a Ford instead of some kind of flashy car. So, and they did it, they had to couch it in a way like, oh, he bought a rental car, or whatever. But it was, but anyway, so I think that those are the things that they can work very, very effectively, especially when you have someone who has a lot of followers or a movie that has a lot of play, and someone that they trust. I talked to I did not talk to someone. I read a documentary or watched a documentary that there was a company in Pennsylvania that made wooden spoons with a little notch in them, so that you could set them on top of your pot while you were cooking, and they would just the wooden spoon would sit across it, and it would keep it from overflowing because all the stuff gets broken up as it hits the wooden spoon, and it's a clean place. It drips off into the pot. Genius thing. Someone came on Oprah, and this was 20, 25 years ago or something like. Someone came over and she's cooking, and Oprah all Oprah did was point out the spoon and say, wow, that's really cool. That's a cool spoon. And the woman who was cooking just said, yeah, this is my favorite spoon. I don't do anything without it. I love this spoon. This is how I use it. Now, they weren't getting paid for that. There was no, they weren't paying for that. But she set it back down, and it almost tore the company apart. Like they got so many orders, they got so many orders that they couldn't fulfill what they needed to do because they had no production for that kind of scale. So that, that kind of thing can be very, very effective.
Jonas?
I think where it can also be very effective is podcasts, but not to introduce a brand, but like Linus Tech Tips, they have a weekly podcast that I watch, and they used to have the same sponsors over and over again, like D-Brand for their cases and stuff like that. And now D-Brand just wrapped the whole table in one of their skins. They do collaborations. They do a single sentence at the start of the show and say like, hey, they are a rep partner, and that's it. But like at the same time, it's very effective to also bring it up in conversation again. So I think that's like with smaller creators where you see that it's like, oh, let's talk about a random case, and you're looking at their raps the whole time. So that also helps. Like everybody else said, it's really hard to attribute it if it's for larger things where like it's more subconscious. If it's more conscious on smaller creators, you might like be able to track it with a "how did you hear about us" thing. But it's everywhere. Like it is everywhere, and if it's a lot of money or not, but sometimes it's not that much money. But a lot of people get paid to say what they are saying, and also like, oh yeah, I just got this thing, and they also sent me money, and that's where it gets weird.
Courtney?
Yeah, they do require attribution a lot of times. If you look in the credits, it'll say the following products provided financial assistance, and you'll see a list of products from the product placement. But it can have a negative impact too if the person with the product or the company with the product that wants to place it gets too demanding. And I've been on many shows that have product placement, where I remember Microsoft had must have been a substantial product placement fee they were paying when they came out with a Surface tablet. And I read the requirement. I was working on it, and I had to prepare the tablets for use. And the stipulations on its appearance it was the Mindy project I think I was working on. And they said, okay, they have to pull out the product. The logo has to be visible. We have to see them assemble the tablet and the keyboard with a click, because that's what they were selling, this little click. It was in their advertising on camera. And the director is just going ballistic, Why, I can't even do this scene. They have to pull out the tablet. We have to see the stupid click. And just a little tirade on the set. So it must have, and the producer comes over and says, hey, look, we're getting, $300,000 for this episode. So we got to do this, And they just hate it. And he swear, I will never put on my show's future. So if you get too demanding, Apple, on the other hand, on Dexter, they didn't care as long as they gave us some computers. I don't think they didn't pay very much money for it. But yeah, and sometimes they'll have requirements. Okay, only the good guys can use the Apple products, and the bad guys have to be using Android products. So there are those kind of stipulations too sometimes. But they didn't do that. We even let the bad guys have the Apple.
Alex,
the largest one of the largest product placements that you'll see that you don't really notice is aircraft carriers. So that you want to do a Top Gun, that is a product placement for the U.S. Navy. So the aircraft carrier, they have to go to the aircraft because you can't make an aircraft carrier. So so they have to go to the Navy and ask for the use of the aircraft carrier, the use of some of the jets, use of all those things, and usually that gets some script input. It doesn't mean that everyone has to be good or anything else, but it definitely affects what you can and can't do with the aircraft carrier, and so those are some of the things that are there. But that, like, Top Gun was probably the largest recruiting movie in the history of the military. So when it came out in the 80s, it was definitely shifted a lot of things.
Well, Paul, thanks for the spark that started that great conversation. You can also drive the show by asking questions and voting on the questions. If you are in Makana, you can vote on questions, chat with the other producers. If you don't have access, just sign up officehours.global/join, and then you'll get an email that's got all the links, Makana Discord. You'll be on the inside track. Next question.
Chris Sabato in Albany, Oregon is asking, I'm looking for a mobile router. I need cellular and a hard line WAN input and 4 LAN ports. Power over Ethernet would be a plus. Any suggestions?
Chris, tell us a little more about that.
So I got an interesting project coming up this spring. Our baseball facility is doing some renovations, so all of our home games will be someplace else. And there's a possibility it'll all be at one place, but I think the more likelihood is like each game may be at a completely different facility. And so I need to build a kit that I can send with people who are not technical, that they can just plug things in. It will connect to the internet. It will, connect my cameras and all that. And so I'm looking for some sort of router that, if they don't connect if they can't get the facility hardline connection, just plugging it in and turn it on will connect to the cellular connection so I can get access to things behind it. And, I was looking at some Peplink stuff, but Peplink has a lot of offerings and I'm not super familiar with them. And so just kind of seeing if anyone had any suggestions of where to look.
Jonas?
Yeah, so what I would say is in the lower budget level, we start with a B1. It's around $300. That one doesn't have an LTE built in, but it has a USB-C where you can plug in a phone. And what probably makes sense for you is the B1 5G or B1 Plus. B1 Plus has a singular LTE modem. It has 2 Ethernet connections. So one thing you can also do is if you have sometimes you get these weird provider-provided hotspots for cheap. Then you can use one of those as well as a secondary network. And they all have USB-C for tethering. So you can just add a phone like that. After that, I would probably look into the Transit Duo Max. That's where you dive into multi-SIM bonding then. but that comes around $1,000 then. So that's kind of the jump that you have to think about if you need multi-SIM or not. And then, but I could totally see you start with a B1 5G or plus, and then if you need a second LTE as well, you can buy one of the smaller B. I think B Core is the smallest one that they have. That's like a singular LTE antenna. And one of the great things is they have something that's called Synergy WAN, where you can tell it, oh, by the way, you're plugged into this router, and then it can use that and manage the LTE across them and just use it as an uplink. And the good thing is, with your B1, you're also getting a singular license of SpeedFusion Up Solo. So you can host one of your own bonding servers either at your facility or wherever you want for free. You also get some amount of data. Might not matter for you too much. But one good thing to also keep in mind is a lot of the newer ones from Peplink also have bring your own eSIM, which that has been super helpful for us being able to just buy whatever eSIM, send the code to it, and have that eSIM installed, and then just have some generic router SIMs in there as well.
Courtney?
Yeah, what Jonas said. That I was going to suggest the BR1, but you probably have already looked at that from Peplink. It has an eSIM built into it, and it doesn't have enough Ethernet ports that you requested, but you can always plug a 8-bit switch into this and deal with that. And one of the inputs over here can be either wide area network or just a local area network coming off of the cellular. So, and I don't know if it'll fail over to the WAN. Maybe Jonas knows that.
So that one is the Mini. The Mini.
BR1 Mini, yes, LTE.
Yeah, and the Mini that can fail over. Some of them require an additional license to do bonding. So I would buy a B1 because for a little more money you get a lot more processing, and then you can buy a Mini to also place outside if you need to extend to secondary LTE.
Yep.
And go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, I'd also just look at a straight up live view. I mean, what are you trying to accomplish? Do you need the internet for local operations like a web page or any kind of scoring or something that you're trying to pull in? Or can you just drop a box and take an HDMI or an HDSDI out of your mixer switcher and up it goes, and that thing's just hot all the time? That's how the news crews do it. That thing's just hot, and they just turn it on and the feed goes up to master control, and so you're handling master control, right? That's you. You're just deploying this thing out there.
Yeah, and I mean, live view was tempting, but the price for what you get for me is just too much. I mean, I'm low budget, and actually for this, I'm no budget. I can spend some money, but there's nothing allocated for this project, so
they start at $999.
What's that?
They start at $999 for a live view solo.
Right, but then I need to ingest that signal somewhere, and so then you need the live view server and.
No, you can go RT. Well, actually, yeah, if you want to bond it back together, then yeah, you need something.
Well,
the LRT service is $350 a year.
But I need to bring the signal to me so that I can put in commercials, and I can I need to ingest the signal into vMix, basically.
Yeah, so it goes up to LRT, then over to you, then you insert your commercials as master control, and then push it back out.
And you can do
that. Yes,
with the live view, you can do that without a live view server.
So it's called LRT, is the service that you pay $350 for. So it goes up to them, rebonds it. So if it's cellular plus Wi-Fi plus the on-site Ethernet, so let's say you have three things, it'll bond all that together or pick the best of them, and you can see it all moving in the back end in the LRT web page, and then you can pull that back to you or direct to YouTube. So you can use an RTMP ingest and have that come to you. And RTMP is actually fast. I mean, people think that it's slow because when they go to YouTube and it takes like 15 seconds, RTMP could be a second. So it's not like forever that you're waiting for that feed to come in for live sports. So yeah, I'd look at live view as well.
That's an interesting. I've looked at it, and I need to dig a little more. One of the other kind of components of this is I need to have some sort of communication with talent and one of the things, because I don't know where we're going to be. Like, I know I'm probably going to have to bring my own internet in some cases. And so that, to me, that seemed like going with like a Peplink type solution that would give me the ability to like, okay, well, our person doing stats needs internet, so they can just plug into the Peplink. And while that's not specific to what I'm doing, it will help the whole production down the road. And so I'm going to look into LiveView a little bit more, but I have a feeling that it's too narrow for what I need.
Jonas?
One tiny point, since we are now on LiveView budget, I would just get a SAT track there and private fiber. No, one cool thing with the Peplinks is you could do 60 if you need to. So they have a TS to 60 wrapper. And then the other thing is, depending on what encoders you might have, you might already have some that can fail over from Ethernet to a plugged-in LTE stick. Not ideal, but like a lot of these LTE sticks do LTE over the tethering connection and then also Wi-Fi. So like in that case, you kind of, just because they know you're on a budget, that might be a like suboptimal solution that still works. The web presenter fails over, a lot of the Magewell fails over, some of the KiloView can fail over. So that might also be something to look at.
Alex?
Mickey points out that you can get internet connectivity out of the live views as well. I think that the question is how important the events are and how much juice they have and whether people care whether they see them or not. And Chris is like, no, they don't care. This is just Chris. Chris is like,
no, this is small. I mean, people will be mad that if there's no broadcast, but people will be more than happy to have a signal. Like,
well, but there's not guarantees that there will be. I mean, there won't be. I mean, the thing is that so what I would do is you can get something smaller. Again, these Peplinks. You can do a lot of other things. Just research the live view and make sure that you know who your live view seller is and everything else. And when your events fail one after the other, there might be more pressure for someone to say, just make this go away and make it work. And then you'll go, I have the perfect solution, because the live view really will fix it. Like I used to lease 2 live views for, 5 years and used them all the time. Now, they were mostly used as backups to satellite trucks and fiber, so they were, but we got to watch them a lot, and I've used them. We've obviously used them for NAB, and so, but I think that just keep that in your back pocket, know how fast you can get one, because all of the solutions that we're talking about right now have a high probability of some errata, if not complete failure, at some point if you keep moving. If you keep going to the same place, you can kind of burrow in, you can figure out where you can get internet, you can kind of work through things. But if you're moving from one place to the other, not having something that just is flexible, to me, a great solution is a live view with a Starlink. Like you have the Ethernet backup there. You're bonding all those things together. You grab onto the Wi-Fi at the facility as well, bond that in there as well. There's lots of things that you can add to those things to make them very, very robust. But I would think about those things and make sure that you know what you're going to do, because I think that most of the solutions will not be stable if you keep on going for it, because stadiums, the kind of places that you go, it's not just that you're going to hotel. The kind of places you go have bad internet. And so these open fields, large old stadiums without a lot of IT infrastructure, these are just kind of the places that we kind of when I'm doing a job for a larger client, those are just satellite truck locations. Like I don't even talk to them about their internet. I just go, I'm just going to bring a truck and we'll call it a day. So those are, you're going to in a really challenging environment.
Next question.
This one's from Peter Moore in Auckland, New Zealand. More of an educational cue, but Alex's response to the ffmpeg question from David: if you're scripting, never use, quote, RM in your first cut. Use is instead, as it will show you what might have happened. Alt $RM-I interactive.
That's LS, not
yeah.
is.
I think it's LS.
Go ahead, Alex.
You don't want to do it when you're first experimenting, but you got to get to a point where the script does what it needs to do. And so that's going to be, as soon as you get to a point where you're comfortable with it, you get to decide how far you want to go with there. But yeah, RM, dash whatever, there's RM-R, there's lots of things that you can do that would be much more aggressive, and you just have to decide what you want to do there.
And when you're figuring out and you're just trying to battle test your script, when you do the rm-i, it's just going to ask you for confirmation before it goes ahead and deletes it. And public service announcement, in the way that I found that out just now, or confirmed my suspicion, is anytime you're in Unix or you're in the Linux and you type in man, you get the manual for that command. So if you type in man rm or man ls, it will come up with all of the little modifiers and what they do, and it's built right in, and it's a great way to learn. Next question.
This one's for me. Jonas, what's new in PlayoutBee 2.10?
Oh, Jonas?
Yeah, we just released a 2.10 with a lot of new updates. Let me see if I can actually do a screen share. I'll just talk about it. So one of the big things that we revamped is the whole settings page is a lot clearer. In the past, the text was a little small. So now the text is a fair bit bigger. And then we also added hotkeys. That was one of the requirement for a rental client is can now use the typical K and L for stop and place, base toggles, and up and down for moving in the list. In the list, you now also see what the specific files are. And then one of the new things we've also added is we added a media manager mode. So if you go to /media manager, it will give you the interface that you know, but without any controls that can affect the current playback. So you can give this to your PA, to a runner, to whoever is managing media to manage your files without them being able to screw you over. We added the name of the currently playing clip at the top, so you always know what that is. You can now set, we're still working on that one, because screens are really weird. Like if you try to open windows on specific screens and over again on the same screen, that is really weird how the different OSs handle screens. But there is now an inferior way, if your screens are named the right way and all that. We will try, if you have two screens, to open our output. There's a setting for it to open it in the second screen, so that should automatically work. You can now set the background of the output. So what you can do in the browser already is like !, background equals, and then type in a URL, a color, or whatever. You can now also do that in the direct output. And then there's also a little 30% off discount for Black Friday today. I will do a little live stream later talking about all the new things. And for the people that already bought PlayoutBee within the last year, there's a free update if you go to updates.playoutbee.com. And for anyone who bought it earlier than that, they can go there and there's a little discount code for those that bought it there that is special for Black Friday.
Go ahead, Alex.
And Alexander had a question. Is there any issues with Sequoia, or is it running fine in Sequoia for macOS?
From all I can know, it works fine. But I don't update my macOS too often.
Right. Okay. Very good.
But that's one of the things with PlayoutBee and us being cross-compatible is we don't go as deep into the OSs than basically any other playout system. We stay fairly on top. That means that we can't deal with a lot of things like MOV files and like direct SDI output and stuff like that we're working on still. But that also means that we're generally not affected because we use the OS in a way like Apple wouldn't want to break YouTube playback in a browser, right? So they probably didn't break PlayoutBee.
Thanks, Jonas. It's always great when we get to you got a question about the program. Let's just ask the guy who wrote it live. And we may be live, but you don't have to be. If you have questions, you can ask them 24/7 at askofficehours.global. It's fast, easy, no sign up or login. Just askofficehours.global, fire away, and we'll work it in over the next couple shows. Next question.
This one's from me and Alfred in London. Would using a Zowiebox as a capture device for my Sony Camera be a good enough capture method for live streaming events or even appearing on office hours?
Courtney?
I haven't used the Zowiebox, but I had to look at the specs on it. It would seem that it would certainly be capable enough. And for the price, with $25 off on Black Friday special here, that since it can deal with NDI and UVC and HDMI pass-through capture, and et cetera, it seems one of the cheapest routes to go. You could go, of course, with the Blackmagic web presenter, which would work, but that would be more expensive. And just a ATEM Mini, which a lot of us are using right now to interface to office hours, is, remember, $300. So that's a pretty cheap way in too. But $179 for the Zowiebox looks pretty good. Plus, I like the little OLED display of signals coming in and configuration going out. So that makes it pretty handy.
Jonas?
I think the Zowiebox is a really cool thing to play around with. But if the event matters to you, I think cheaping out your encoder on your encoder is probably not the way to go. The Zowiebox has some really cool and neat features, and I carry one with me. A couple of things to keep in mind is that the USB-C power needs power delivery, so it's not just your off-the-shelf power plug that can charge it. But what is really cool is that you can use it as an encoder or decoder. For something like office hours, I would personally want my signal to be as fast as possible into Zoom instead of going into NDI, getting encoded as HX, getting unencoded, put into a virtual webcam or something like that. It can definitely work for streaming events, but test it. And I personally would not want to bet my event on it.
And then go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, it'll definitely work as a capture device, but there's way cheaper devices if you're just using an HDMI type camera as an encoder. It's pretty fantastic for the price. I've been using, right now you're seeing me on a Bird Dog encoder. So what it does is that Bird Dog that's 5 times the price will take in the HDMI feed in 4K and convert it to NDI. And this box will do it for the same price, NDI HX. Keep in mind that this is NDI HX, not full fat NDI. So the Bird Dog, even though it costs a lot more, it's full fat NDI. Now, if you want to use it as an encoder, the other cool thing about this one is it is a 4K encoder, and it'll even do H.265. So here's the pull down where you can see that it's not just H.264, it is H.265. And it is easy just to go into the streaming and go to live, and you can pop in, add a new service, and there's YouTube, and then custom is here where you can choose enhanced RTMP or SRT. So I've tested this thing with 4 1080 feeds, so you can take something like this this ARRI $159 quad HDMI box, and then make it one 4K feed, and then you could feed this up to something like vMix and extract it back out. So this is a way of shooting in H.265 4 feeds up to another location for $150. It's pretty amazing, and I've burned it in for over a week and just let it encode, and it's been fine. So like Jonas says, if you want to gamble and use this on an event, if it's low impact to your reputation, if it goes down, then go for one of these. If not, then I'd also be looking at the Epiphan Pearl Nano or an Osprey Talon at the $2,000 mark if you're playing hard, or go up to an Elemental if you want to go big.
And then, Ian, you've excited the chat with this question. There's a lot of opinions on this. A lot of folks are mentioning that there's a little too much latency probably for a live conversation, that we might end up talking over each other. That was from Mickey and JJ. And then John Wallace says, stay away from Blackmagic or anything UVC. Never use them for encoding. Finally, Magewell was brought up as another option for a good encoder. So let us know how you fare. Next question.
Robert Shoji in Los Angeles is asking, do you still shoot projects in 1080p, or do you now shoot everything in 4K or better?
Jesse?
If we're shooting digital, we're usually shooting 4K 60 at this point, because 4K 60 contains 4K 30, and it contains 1080 60, and it contains 1080 30. You can always go back to those lower frame rate or lower resolution formats if you're shooting very high and very high resolution and high frame rate. We do produce in 1080, but that's only when we're shooting 8 or 16 millimeter film. And we found that the 4K scan doesn't give you the bang for the buck on certainly not on 8 millimeter, and you might get a little bit more detail on 16 millimeter, but not enough to justify the added cost of that scan.
Alexander?
I'm limited to mostly 1080p because of my ATEM Mini switcher that does that. Although I do have cameras that can do 4K. for podcasts and stuff like that, I just record internally at 1080p on my ATEM, and that's fine. For anything serious, like if I'm doing a music video or a documentary or something where I'm going to take my camera, it's like I'll just shoot natively on the camera at 4K at a higher frame rate, or I'll use a Atomos recorder. If I want something super high quality, you're going to pick something like ProRes 422 or higher, or I'm going to even do RAW if it really, really matters. So it just depends on the content. Although from watching what we're doing here, I'm very interested in moving my own podcast, upscaling from 1080p to 4K, because there's definitely a sharpness increase.
Alex?
Yeah, we've been mostly buying 4K hardware for about the last 8 years. So a lot of the stuff, when Blackmagic started going out to 4K, we just started buying 4K stuff in 2016. I just didn't want to go backwards. I didn't want to be limited. So everything we bought really had to have that capability. The reality is that most of our clients haven't asked for it. We do record oftentimes in 4K or above. When we deliver, a lot of the stuff still ends up in 1080p, 60, 1080p, and a variety of other ways. And sometimes the final delivery is 1080p, but we still, if we can, we're going to record in 4K or RAW or something much larger, because that gives us a lot of headroom. We can do pan and scans. We can do the oversampling will improve the quality of the image. So we've done ones where we've recorded the whole 4K and we bring it back down to 1080. And just the process of going halfway with the right interpolation makes it look much sharper, gets rid of a lot of the grain, gets rid of a lot of other things that can definitely improve it, even if you're doing a 1080p delivery. One of the things that I've gotten into doing more and more of with varying levels of success is recording in the camera as well as in the extreme ISOs. So we record the ISOs in the camera. I'm going to get a resolve file out of that, but I have matching resolve files that are in the camera. And the camera recording, if you're using Blackmagic cameras, are matched. Those start times are matched up with the ones that are recorded there. And it works most of the time. Like I don't depend on it. I still am glad that I still have a separate recorder that's recording just the raw output from the switcher to make sure that I have what I need there. So those are some things to think about as you go down. One thing to think about with the frame rate is that just because you can go from 60 to 30 or 120 to 30 or any of those other things, remember that your motion blur changes. And so you have to decide where your motion blur is going to sit. If you go with 60 with a 180 degree shutter, you're going to end up with a 90-degree shutter at 30, and that's going to look like Saving Private Ryan. Like that's what they shot it in. So that a little bit more framey and so on and so forth. One of the things that we did, we had productions for a long time that the host was shooting at 720/60, and so what we would do is we'd ask them to open up their shutter to 360. It didn't really make a difference at 60. I mean, people couldn't really tell the difference. It's technically a little bit more dreamy because the motion blur is a little longer. But what it did do is it made sure that our 30 frame per second looked natural as far as that goes. When we shoot at 120, we actually keep it at a 360 shutter, because then the 60 looks proper, and then it helps if we have to interpolate 120 into 30 or 24, which we don't do live. We will take that into optical flow, and that extra motion blur helps us blend those frames together more effectively. So you can, as you start to go into higher frame rates and higher resolutions, that's important. But for many, many things that we do, we deliver live at 1080p, but have records at 4K to make sure that we future-proof something that we're doing that has, typically when I'm working on it, has a lot of budget. So we want them to have the best, and also delivering 4K as a moat around your. So if you have equipment that's all 4K and you're delivering 4K all the time to your client, if they go to somebody else and get 1080p, regardless of whether they need it or not, they're going to look down on that other production company. They got the lower resolution. So, you doing things that don't cost you a lot of money. There's, most of the stuff is not hard to do 4K now. And again, if I have a camera that's able to do RAW at 6K or 8K or whatever, oftentimes I'll go after it. You just have to note that, and yeah, Mickey pointed out, note that UHD is not true DCI 4K. And I don't know anybody usually when we're talking about, once we go to talk about DCI 4K, we're talking about however big of the sense, we're going to grab the whole sensor, or grab as much resolution as the camera can deliver. But I do admit most time, because I'm doing broadcast, mostly when I say 4K, I do mean UHD. So it's not truly 4K. But in the nomenclature is kind of thought of that way, and at least in the broadcast area.
Jonas?
A lot of the live broadcast stuff is still 1080. I'm happy if I arrive somewhere and it's 1080p and not 1080i. That already makes me happy. One thing to consider if you're doing 4K and the client has asked you for 1080p is actually be on your toes and be ready to deliver the asked for file. Like if they ask you for a 1080p file and you send them a 4K file, and that clogs up the whole system because they don't know how to transfer that. Their editors' machines can't handle with it. That's one thing to keep in mind. And file delivery, you don't want to be like stuck with waiting to we're still transcoding or exporting this when the client needs the file quickly. So make sure that you actually know what your client requires. You can offer them bonuses, but then also keep in mind that now the client might expect that on the next one for the same price and gave it for them on this one.
If you're enjoying the conversation, you're looking for a variation on the theme, we have 2 new evening shows for you to watch, live or later. So Extra Hours is Monday nights, 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 Eastern, and then The Rundown is on Thursdays, also 6 Pacific, 9 Eastern. Next question.
Rion Smith in Trinidad, West Indies. I want to run PlayoutBee and Companion on the same Raspberry Pi 4. I realized PlayoutBee was built on 32-bit ARM and Companion on 64-bit, so I'm thinking install both manually to a fresh instance, but it's not working for me. Few tutorials for the non-Linux techie.
Go ahead, Jonas.
I'll just hit on a couple points that you'll probably run into. On the Raspberry Pi, there's 2 things that can be 32-bit and 64-bit. There's the firmware and the kernel, and then there's the actual OS. If you don't set specific settings in your config.txt, you might end up having a 64-bit operating system and a 64-bit kernel, and then you change the operating system to 32-bit for PlayoutBee, and you still have a 64-bit kernel, and then it should, in theory, work, but we have had a lot of issues with that. What I would say is go grab the latest PlayoutBee complete file, the complete image, download that, and then install Companion on top if you really, really want to do this. That being said, if we're talking about a show that you actually care about, I would not put my eggs for control and playback in the same basket. So it can be done, but we will never do like a prepared image for it. I don't believe that is the best interest, but it can definitely be done, especially if you download Companion Pi just as Node.js, then you can do it that way if you don't use the pre-builds.
Next question.
This one's from Tommy Shantz in St. Paul, Minnesota. Is anyone here familiar with the Sound Devices mixassist plugin? If so, do you find it useful too?
Courtney?
I don't have the mixassist plugin because it won't install on my MixPre 3 version 1. So make sure you have a version 2 of the MixPre 3 or MixPre 6. But remember, it was designed by the same guys. The guys that started Sound Devices came over from Shure, and they designed this. I've used this in several situations, a Shure SMC 410 auto mic mixer, which has its lineage back to the same engineers that started Sound Devices. So it's probably very similar. What I like, and I have used in auto mix mode, is my F6, which has 6 inputs. It's a little bit cheaper. It has really good preamps, 72 dB gain in these preamps, so they're pretty quiet. And the auto mix feature, you can auto mix up to 6 inputs on this very compact mixer, and it also handles power a lot better than the Sound Devices I've found did. So if you're using it in the field and not tied to shore power, that might be a good choice if you haven't purchased a mixer yet. If you already have the Sound Devices, then it can be good. And it's definitely useful in situations where you're in a regular location, you've got lavs on people, and it's a podcast or a group situation discussion where you don't know who's going to talk and when. It's perfect for that kind of stuff, and it only keeps one mic primary up hot, and so it reduces the echo because you can keep all the other mics. It will keep all the other mics at a lower level when they're not speaking. So it does help reduce the roominess of your mix, and you don't have to pay that much attention to it. So it's very handy for those situations.
Alex?
Now, Mickey says the mixassist plugin works on all versions of the Mix Pre-recorder family, including the first generation. So I don't know if that's actually, Courtney doesn't have that experience, but maybe you can take a look at it and see if that's the case. This is really good when you have 3 people or 5 people or 6 people sitting around and you want to have it just prioritize those things. Especially, it's very much like a Dugan Auto Mix. And what it does is it means that a lot of times when you're dealing with a field recorder, you got all these little dials. You don't really have a way to, unless you pay a lot of extra money, you don't have a lot of ways to just easily adjust those things as people are talking. And as Courtney said, you don't know who's going to talk next. Mixassist helps clean that all up, especially for the stereo record out. Even though you'll have those tracks and you could clean that up in post, it definitely adds a lot to what you're doing. For when we use it, we're using Dugan Auto Mix most of the time for something, for live events. And it's you get to a point where you can't do it without it.
Next question.
Zach Stahlsmith in Chicago, New York, researching multicorders. Are there pros and cons of using either a vMix multicorder or an ATEM Mini Pro ISO to get the job done for 720p recordings? Or are they both fine to achieve this? Thanks.
Chris?
Obviously, there are pros and cons, and I would say the pros and cons are probably pretty similar to choosing the ATEM for production versus vMix for production. I use vMix extensively, and I love its flexibility in the way I can make it do all kinds of things. But the problem is I can make it do all kinds of things, and some of the things I can make it do, it can't actually do. Which when you're talking about doing things that are important, and if you really need those multicorders, you're probably going to end up with a better end result using something that's hardware based. If you've got a beefy vMix system that can handle it, then great, do it. But yeah, it's kind of balancing out what's more important to you and what your existing infrastructure is. If you don't have either of these and you're looking at them, it's certainly going to be much easier to get going with an ATEM.
Jonas?
It depends, and it depends on what coming in and what needs to come out. Like, are you recording NDI streams and you wanted the highest possible quality? Great, use Studio Monitor, click it a couple times, and now you have a free multicorder that is pretty synced. It will stay synced. If you have any issues irregularities in your NDI feed, well, tough luck, because now it just keeps resetting your file. So if you want one continuous file, that isn't a good idea. If, for example, you want to record a lot of SDI or HDMI signals, you might be tempted to say, hey, that's a great job for the ATEM Mini. One thing to keep in mind is make sure that the drive can sustain the read-write speeds that you need. Make sure that it's a format that you need. One weird thing with the ATEM ISO recording is all the audio channels get put somewhere else. You get program audio on all the videos, so now you need to match those later. It's really helpful if you have a little clapperboard and you clap before anybody is in the room and then start the record. The other thing to also keep in mind with vMix is if you record in vMix, make sure that you know what the file format is you're choosing. If you use vMix AVI, you're going to need to recompile it, re-encode it. If you use MP4, make sure you use something that can be interrupted. There's file formats like MP4 that by default, if they're not closed, because the container has to do some things when the file is done being written, it will corrupt the whole file. You wouldn't want to lose the whole hour because your intern clicked the power off button on your switch on your computer before you save the file. So that is one of the common issues, one of the things why in OBS, for example, you always record an MKV. You record the exact same H.264 content, but just in a container that can deal with interruptions. So if you record in vMix, I would say record in MKVs. If you need multicorders for 720p, I mean, this might be a great opportunity to buy yourself a little 4-channel multi-viewer and feed that into a singular 1080p record. And one thing that people also always forget is make sure you have enough drive space. Make sure you have enough drive space to start the recording before anything starts. I really, really dislike when people go, and we're 30 seconds before show, roll the record. Because now we have all the things, everything that could be going wrong leads to this one point in the time, and now you already started and you lost the first little bit. We build workflows where we can trim the in and outs really easily on all our files for that. And I'm sure Guy will say something about, I feel like an ARRI
Guy?
I just might say that I have 9 key pros sitting around the corner. But yeah, besides hardware decks that you could use that actually have SDI in and the ability to do things like have LTC time code, so then it's actually embedded in the metadata, and then when you go into an editing app, all of those clips just drop right in and everything lines up perfectly. So be aware though of the file format, as Jonas was saying, through your entire editing workflow, because what you want to do is make sure that everything is smooth on the editing computer, because you can record it in something like a ProRes that's nice and smooth and just edits like a dream, or you can record in something like H.265 on the new HyperDeck Studio 4K, and then when you try to edit, it's just really sluggish and your timeline just feels really bouncy, and you need to get a new M4 or something because it can't slice through it like butter. So just be aware of the entire process, and then calculate how big all those files are actually going to be. 720 is pretty lightweight, but so it's what file format and what size, and then sustained over time. So if it's a 3-hour show, be aware that you want to test and bake all this stuff in beforehand.
Alex?
Yeah, I think hard about 720p as a recording if anything matters. I mean, I guess if you're just showing that you recorded it, it's fine. But 720p is a pretty low resolution to record the final thing that you have there, unless that's the maximum resolution of your entire system. What we do a lot of times is we have a primary and a backup of the program, or we have the program and a clean version that we're recording at the same time. We start one of them oftentimes 10 or 15 minutes before, and we start the other one oftentimes right before, like 30 seconds or a minute before it. And the reason we do that is if someone forgets or something else is going on or whatever, we still have a record. we still have the record there. But the reason we do that is because sometimes our delivery time, even without those, our delivery time is literally within 2 minutes after the show, we're going to hand the client something that they're going to run off to social with, and we just don't want to. It's literally transfer time, because again, a lot of times we're doing things at 4K 60, and so that adds minutes to the transfer time. And so a lot of times we'll hit it right on that edge, just to get that, to make sure that but we always have something else that we started 5 or 10 or 15 minutes ago.
If you'd like to help Office Hours, there are a few ways you can do that. You can like and subscribe to our channel. Also, we're a nonprofit, so you can donate at officehours.global/donate, or even volunteer. If you're interested in helping out with your time, you can always go to officehours.global/volunteer and sign up there. Let's go. Well, one more question.
Ronnie Hopsoy in Tromsø, Norway is asking, if I would build my own TrueNAS based on older hardware but buying new disks, but would it be a good idea to also buy a new disk I/O interface, or just use the built-in SATA 300 on the main board? What would be the pros and cons?
Jonas?
What I would say is, if you're considering buying a new disk interface, I would probably buy a new motherboard. And one thing to keep in mind if you're building your own storage solution is keep cold spares. It's great to have a RAID, but it's really bad to have a RAID that you don't have a replacement drive for and can't get anyone because they're no longer fabricated, or you can't get it right now because it's a holiday or something, or your supplier takes ages to get them to you. So that's also something to keep in mind. If you're using a software RAID and you're just plugging them in, the risk there is a little lower because you don't have a RAID card that could go faulty. But that's also a thing. If you buy a different interface and you buy like a RAID card and not just something that is can attach to a JBOD, I would make sure that you have a replacement card for that as well. Same model, same firmware, keep them up to date. Because you don't want to be the person that says, yeah, I have everything on my RAID, but the RAID card doesn't work. And then you have all your data, but you can't access it. But I would probably spend the money on a new motherboard if you're considering that it won't be enough for you. I would just go through what speed amounts do you need.
Coming up on Office Hours tomorrow and Sunday, we have our live-only shows. I like to think of them as members only. We need jackets, though. Saturday's a live is just a 1-hour Q&A, and Sunday's an introspection show. So if you're interested in talking about Office Hours or asking more philosophical questions about the industry or why are we doing what we're doing, Sunday's a place for you. Big thank you to our panel for being here today. I'd like to say no one of us is as smart as all of us, and what a privilege it is to spend an hour getting smarter, even on Black Friday. It's kind of amazing. Thanks to the back-end crew. There's a small village that lights up all over the world every single day to make this show run. And the volunteers are absolutely indispensable. We literally couldn't do it without you. Finally, thank you to the producers for asking such great questions. It's a really short show without you, and you keep us going every single day. It's Saturdays, Sundays, holidays, doesn't matter. You're always there for us. We appreciate it. If we would have had to go around on foot or plane or whatever today and check out the Slawlek traversal, we would have had to go 44,000 miles, almost twice around the globe. 70,000 kilometers, that's 345 million bananas for scale. All right, we'll see you in After Hours.
We didn't even do any questions about Black Friday, like what to get.
Isn't that great? It's so nice.
I'm going to try to put together a list of like my top 5 things. I haven't quite figured out what those. Oh, look at that guy got the battery, the big battery.
No Omniscope is on my list.
I know. Oh, wow. Omniscope. The reason I thought I should make a list is that I just got the email from Omniscope going, hey, it's 30% off. And I was like, oh, that's we don't have a relationship with them. They've been on the show, but outside of that, it's not like they're sponsoring or anything. But I was like, that's just a public service announcement that you can get great scopes for 30% less. Yeah.
Central Control, 50% off.
Oh, Central Control. That's good. That's good. Yeah. Okay. We'll take a look at that too.
I was looking for something for my brother who's a big Taylor Swift fan, and so I lined up at Target at 5 o'clock this morning to get the in-person only vinyls, and it was 100 people deep in